Hey guys, tonight we drift back to the Ottoman Empire, not for any grand conquest or sultanate drama, but for something far more riveting, the surprisingly elaborate tale of a ruler's obsession with vegetables, specifically turnips, big ones. Imagine a golden-domed palace, wafting with incense, the hum of fountains in marble courtyards, and nestled in the middle of this imperial splendor, an aging sultan gently weighing a turnip the size of your head, pondering its girth with all the solemnity of statecraft. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes at one of his banquets, unless you like root vegetables more than a little. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history pod travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together that you're strolling through a 16th century Anatolian market, led by the scent of sumac and frying dough. But something is off. Amid the baskets of figs and jars of honey, a merchant has gathered a small crowd. He's shouting about a turnip. Not just any turnip. A beast of a thing, resting on a cart like an injured sheep. Purple-streaked, lumpy, nearly spherical. An old woman mutters, "Fit for the palace." It draws your eye in an oddly magnetic way. Something about the humble lump's prominence among spices and silk suggests importance, mystery, even. The merchant is practically crooning now, extolling the turnip's miraculous girth, its fragrant core, its symbolic potency. You're not sure if he's serious, but the crowd is listening. From the corner of your ear, someone whispers, "The Sultan's going to love this one." This is your first brush with the strange, turnip-tinged myth of Sultan Selim III, a man remembered not for his reforms, his wars, or his court intrigues, but for the soft, earthy love he bore for root vegetables of notable size. You duck through a shaded alley, thoughts lingering on the bulbous vegetable, and pass through a low archway into the quieter quarters of the city. There, gossip flows like mint tea. A boy recounts how a cousin of a cousin once saw a turnip on a velvet pillow, carried through the gates of Topkapi Palace. A baker claims she was once paid in gold for a single oversized beet. The stories spiral. Inside the palace walls, life moves at a different pace. Selim III rises just past dawn. His rooms smell faintly of musk, rosewater, and slightly damp parchment. He slips into slippers lined with Angora wool, murmurs a prayer, and summons his head gardener. What's the forecast? How fare the tubers? Any new specimens to inspect? You find him now in a sunlit courtyard, gazing solemnly at a neatly arrayed row of turnips, purple, white, streaked, mottled. Each has been brushed, weighed, and labeled with its village of origin. A eunuch records notes. The Sultan, stroking his beard, hums tunelessly. This ritual repeats daily, with the same sense of reverence usually reserved for military plans or religious rites. Sometimes, Selim circles a particularly promising root, tutaying in appreciation. He does not rush. Time, in the garden, flows differently. His head gardener, Yusuf, once an olive farmer turned imperial horticulturist, knows the Sultan's preferences intimately. Selim favors firmness, a certain curvature of the shoulders, subtle veining near the stem. He loathes overwatering, and has developed a theory that playing ney flute music at dawn results in sweeter flesh. Historians still argue whether this obsession was madness, metaphor, or masterful diplomacy. But in this moment, as the morning breeze lifts the scent of jasmine and loam, It feels like none of that matters. The palace cat, affectionately known as Pickle, weaves through the turnip trays, occasionally swatting one for fun. No one minds. Later that morning, a delegation from Bursa arrives. They carry silks, scrolls, and, as tradition now demands, a humble offering from the earth. This one is long and gnarled, like a wizard's toe. The court whispers, "Will the Sultan approve?" He does. With a nod and a slow, deliberate clap, he announces, "This root tells a story." Nearby, scribes scribble. The Turnip Log, Volume 3, page 217, is updated. Ink flows. Some of the more literary record keepers include haikus. Strong in silence / root sleeps through winter / glory in the stew. In a distant chamber, the royal chef begins sketching new ideas. Turnip fritters, turnip preserves, turnip candies for the next children's feast. The chef, a lean man with a voice like bubbling broth, hums as he slices last week's harvest, which now forms the base of a mild, creamy soup served in silver cups. You wander the palace as sunlight dapples mosaics and oil lamps flicker in shaded alcoves. A young page shuffles past with a tray of pickled vegetables. Another polishes a brass bowl filled entirely with what looks like turnip seeds. There's an entire hallway in the administrative wing with dried specimens, some varnished and labeled, others left to shrink naturally. You overhear two courtiers debating the philosophical implications. It is a metaphor, one insists. The turnip grows unseen beneath the soil, as does the strength of empire. The other replies, "No, it is merely delicious." In the music room, a newly commissioned piece called Sonata for 3 Turnips and Drum is being rehearsed. It's not bad. You find your foot tapping. Even the royal astronomer, pressured by Selim's curious enthusiasm, now predicts seasonal harvests based on moonlight angles. If Jupiter is in Leo, he solemnly declared last week, expect a slightly spicier crop. As the sun arcs overhead, Selim retires indoors. A low divan, a warm sherbet, and a bowl of turnip crisps await. He munches contemplatively, then murmurs something that sounds like, "Glory lies in girth." You think he might be asleep, or meditating, or composing a poem in his mind. You retreat to a cushioned bench near the gardens. The call to prayer drifts softly over the rooftops. Somewhere, a new turnip is being pulled from the earth. The day has only begun. The Sultan dreams in furrows. As twilight bathes the sky in indigo and the last notes of the muezzin echo off marble domes, Selim III reclines in a gently rocking hammock strung between 2 apricot trees. His thoughts drift, not to matters of war or taxation, but to the yield of a patch near Edirne where, last spring, a turnip the size of a water jug startled a group of picnicking bureaucrats. In his dream, the soil parts like velvet, revealing not just tubers, but ancient secrets. He steps forward, robed in silk embroidered with tiny root patterns, and lifts a gleaming, perfectly round turnip as choirs sing in Old Persian. He wakes with a start, murmuring, "I must speak with Yusuf." Yusuf, ever ready, appears before dawn in the Sultan's chambers. He is holding a clay pot filled with damp loam and a single green sprout. "It germinated, my lord," he says, voice tinged with triumph and disbelief. Selim leans in, nostrils flaring slightly. "Is this from the mountain seed?" "Yes. The one gifted by the shepherd who claims he dreamed of a talking goat that promised abundance." The Sultan nods slowly, gravely. This is good. Elsewhere, palace life tiptoes around these oddities. The Grand Vizier, an aging man with impressive eyebrows and a low tolerance for whimsy, watches the proceedings with visible strain. We used to prepare for sieges, he grumbles into his morning coffee. Now we polish tubers. He's not wrong. Each morning, the gardeners polish them with oil-soaked cloths. They speak to them, too, in the hopes of inspiring superior growth. Gentle words, Yusuf insists, make for generous roots. There is, however, an emerging problem. Too many turnips. A courtyard once used for archery practice is now entirely devoted to raised beds. The old elephant paddock? Now a vast nursery of root crops. Even the palace archives smell faintly of compost, as records are moved to make room for new sorting racks. Your Majesty, a young administrator pleads one afternoon, the Janissaries are growing restless. They say their training grounds are full of mulch. Selim tilts his head. Perhaps they should train in mulch. Builds character. The Janissaries are less convinced. A compromise is reached. Each regiment adopts a ceremonial vegetable. The elite Bostanchi Corps choose the radish, sleek, sharp, efficient. The palace guards select the rutabaga, citing its resilient essence. Only the Janissaries object, resenting the turnip foisted upon them. That winter, rumors swirl. The turnip faction, it's said, is plotting reforms. Some claim the Sultan's next vizier will be a farmer. Others whisper of a secret order, the Order of the Hollow Root, who meet under moonlight to chant blessings over seeds. Historians still argue whether these rumors had any basis. What's certain is that Selim issued an imperial decree establishing the Bureau of Root Weights and Measures. Housed in a domed annex painted with murals of heroic vegetables, it is staffed entirely by scribes who wear purple robes and carry tiny brass scales. Their work is oddly meticulous. Every turnip that enters the palace is documented. Weight, circumference, hue, skin texture. Emotional impact. 1 turnip, imported from Wallachia, is described as somber, introspective. Another, grown in coastal Smyrna, is jaunty but lacks depth. Each evening, these findings are presented to the Sultan over dinner, where they're discussed with the same gravity others might devote to foreign policy. You see, Selim explains to a confused ambassador from Venice, the heart of empire lies in the soil. If you can't love a turnip, how can you love a people? The Venetian writes in his diary that night, either a genius or mad, possibly both. The dinner was quite good. Meanwhile, Yusuf's miracle sprout grows. It is transferred into larger pots, then into a private bed lined with sand and warm bricks. Musicians play flute nearby. A silk tint shades it at noon. Selim visits it daily. He speaks to it softly, sometimes reciting couplets. O tuber of destiny / swell gently in the dark. The palace begins to believe. Pickle the cat sleeps beside it. A sparrow builds a nest nearby. The weather cooperates. Spring arrives early. 1 morning. The earth cracks slightly. Yusuf falls to his knees. It begins. And so, does a new chapter. There's a silence to palace corridors at dawn. A kind of velvety hush, broken only by the occasional clink of sandals on stone, the swish of a broom across mosaic, or the delicate sigh of someone trying not to sneeze in front of royalty. This morning, however, that hush is disturbed, not by ceremony, not by a diplomatic visit, but by the creak of a wheelbarrow. Inside it, nestled among folds of brocade, is a truly monstrous turnip. Yusuf pushes the barrow like a man guiding treasure. He's already had it oiled, buffed, and dusted with powdered rose petal to give it a subtle sheen. Nearby, the Sultan walks barefoot on the cool marble, a clay cup of milk in one hand, wearing a robe embroidered with, yes, tiny repeating vegetable patterns. He pauses every few paces to gaze upon the barrow's contents as though checking on a newborn child. Do you see, Selim whispers, how the lines curve here, like the Bosphorus? Yusuf nods solemnly. Indeed, Your Majesty. A root worthy of poetry. The scribes have already assembled in the garden. A low table is prepared with ink pots, fresh parchment, and tea. One of them yawns discreetly behind his sleeve. He was up late trying to rhyme turnip with sultanic and has little to show for it. They begin the weighing. First, the scale is polished, then calibrated with brass weights. Finally, the turnip is hoisted by two footmen and placed gingerly onto the pan. There is a collective intake of breath. The scale dips. The pointer quivers. One scribe lets out a low whistle. 5 1/3 Ottoman Akka, someone declares. Selim beams. For comparison, that's roughly 14 pounds, or as one palace maid put it later, 2 chubby cats in a teapot. It's not the heaviest on record, but its symmetry, its polish, and its subtle lavender hue send ripples of admiration through the gathered audience. And then, a second barrel arrives. This one, unannounced, pushed by a courier from the distant province of Van. The man, red-cheeked and windburned, bows deeply. A gift from the village of Galkuk, Your Majesty. Selim leans in. The turnip inside is leaner, rougher. Dust still clings to its roots, but its spiral pattern, naturally occurring, curling inward like a seashell, draws gasps. The two roots are placed side by side. It is like gazing upon wisdom and ambition. The Sultan murmurs. A debate begins. Courtiers shuffle. A painter arrives with a sketch pad. A small choir of eunuchs practices harmonies nearby, unsure if they'll be needed for a commemorative tune. The morning fades to afternoon. A delegation of scholars arrives. One insists that the spiral turnip is an omen from the stars. Another counters that it's clearly the result of inconsistent watering. A third, sleep-deprived and fond of metaphysics, proclaims it a symbol of divine recursion. The Sultan nods through all of it. Then, turning to his chef, declares, prepare both, side by side, in the same dish. Gasps. Yusuf turns pale. Your Majesty, the flavors may clash. Precisely, Selim replies. Let them challenge each other. The tongue must not sleep. Dinner is an event. Tables are draped. Lamps lit. Dishes unveiled. The new turnip fusion, sliced thin, pickled with cloves and honey, dusted with sumac, arrives in gilded bowls. It is odd. Sweet, then bitter. Crunchy. Mysterious. Selim eats in silence. Then, yes, this is empire. He retires to his quarters. Later that night, Yusuf stands alone in the garden. The moon is full. Crickets chirp. Pickle the cat curls beside a ceramic planter. He whispers to the earth, grow well, my children. The breeze carries the scent of mint and damp soil. And far beneath, roots stretch quietly. Dawn again, and something new has sprouted, an idea, a notion, a barely whispered concept that drifts like steam from a morning teacup. Sultan Selim III is already awake, of course. He rarely sleeps more than 4 hours. Dreams are too slow. Roots grow faster. In his hand, he holds a sketch. Not his own, though his marginal doodles, carrots and fez hats, a melancholy beat, have begun showing up in the margins of court records. No, this one is from a calligrapher's apprentice. A young man named Halil, quiet and perpetually ink-smudged. He presented it nervously the day before, expecting rebuke. It depicts a turnip throne, elaborate, carved, surreal, with broad leaves arching behind like peacock feathers and coils of root forming the armrests. Selim stares at it now, sipping sour cherry juice, eyes glittering. A statement, he murmurs. A symbol of nourishment and rain. Yusuf, summoned as always, squints at the parchment. It would be difficult in practice. Heavy. Then make it lighter, Selim shrugs. Use wood, or lacquered gourd. Thus begins the commissioning of the turnip throne. Craftsmen are summoned from across the empire. carvers from Damascus, lacquer experts from Persia, leaf artisans from Bursa. Even a furniture guild from Venice sends designs curious and just a bit mocking. The project becomes palace lore before a single chip of wood is carved. Meanwhile, palace life adapts. A new contest is held, the most philosophical turnip. Scribes submit entries. This one leans to the left, as if pondering democracy. This root spirals inward, surely, a symbol of introspection. Salim loves them all. He pins his favorite to the garden wall. Pickle the cat bats it down within the hour. A minor scandal erupts when a gardener swaps labels on 2 entries. For 3 days, an average turnip is hailed as the most eloquent specimen of the year, before a skeptical cook points out it's actually last week's leftover stew root. Punishment is swift but kind. The gardener is reassigned to melon duty. Meanwhile, Yusuf is buried in logistics. The turnip beds need weeding. The compost bins are overflowing. One particularly unruly batch of turnips has begun growing sideways, disrupting a ceremonial pathway. I believe they're rebelling, he mutters to himself. The Bureau of Root Weights and Measures issues a new decree. No more ceremonial pickling without proper documentation. The pickle vault is nearly full, and one unfortunate eunuch was startled awake by a leaking JAR.AT dinner. Salim receives a dish of pureed turnip mousse shaped like a miniature ziggurat. He studies it for several minutes, then asks the chef, "Do you believe it dreamed of being this shape?" The chef nods gravely. "I am sure of it, my lord." Not all are thrilled by this vegetal focus. The Grand Vizier stages a quiet intervention. He arrives with charts, ledgers, news of a border skirmish. Salim waves it all away with one hand and gestures to the throne sketch. "Tell me," he says, "do you see the power in this root?" The Vizier sighs. "I see. Fibrous density." Exactly. And so, the turnip age continues. The throne, once a joke, becomes real. It takes 4 months. Painted, polished, placed under a pergola of woven vines. Salim tries it out during an afternoon breeze. "It's a bit stiff," he admits. "We can pat it," Yusuf suggests. "No," Salim says. "Let the discomfort remind me, governance is no cushioned affair." He decrees that each month, a different province may submit a ceremonial turnip to sit beside the throne for a week. It is a great honor. In faraway villages, contests erupt. Children measure roots in secret. Elders consult almanacs. Farmers whisper to their soil. The empire listens, and somewhere, deep in the garden, beneath moonlight and jasmine, Yusuf smiles. For what began as a seed has become a movement. The rains come late that year. First as a mist that softens the tiles, then with sudden thunderclaps that rattle the stained glass. The garden exhales. Earthworms rise in ecstatic pilgrimage. The palace drains groan like elderly musicians tuning their instruments. But Salim III, he is radiant. Rain means growth. Rain means the soil is whispering again. He walks through the drizzle barefoot, robe-soaked, hair flattened against his scalp. "Let it in," he says to no one in particular. "Let it touch everything." Yusuf trails behind, holding an umbrella made from lacquered fig leaves. "Your Majesty," he pleads, "you'll catch your death." If death comes on turnip-scented rain, Salim murmurs, "Let it be so." The new seedlings are thriving. Particularly one, the spiral-rooted sprout from the shepherd's seed. It has doubled in size since the last full moon. A ring of guards now encircles it day and night. A silk canopy has been rigged to adjust with the angle of the sun. Visitors are allowed one at a time. They must bow to it. Some do so sincerely. Others stifle laughter. A few leave crying, unsure why. Salim keeps a journal of its growth. Daily entries. Doodles. He names it Kazim. No one asks why. Perhaps it's better that way. One day, a visiting poet offers a haiku. root in damp silence unfolding in hidden strength whispers to the sky. Salim weeps. Quietly, with dignity. Back in the palace kitchens, the chefs face a different challenge, a glut of turnip-related leftovers. They try everything: turnip souffle, turnip tarts, turnip marmalade. A new turnip and cardamom ice cream is met with cautious optimism. Meanwhile, the palace's lesser staff, scribes, stable boys, the occasional visiting cousin, begin trading turnip pieces like relics. One small sliver, allegedly from Kazim's leaf, is sold in the back courtyard for 6 silver aki. This concerns the vizier. These roots, he says at the next council, are becoming currency. Is that not a sign of value? Salim counters. It is a sign of distraction. And here, for a rare moment, the room quiets. Even the usually cheerful Yusuf frowns. It's true. Reports have slowed. Messengers wait days for replies. One soldier writes home that his last order was to protect a squash disguised as a turnip. Salim listens. He nods. Then, gently, perhaps, we need balance. A plan is drafted. Not to lessen the turnips, but to contextualize them. A new exhibition is announced. Roots and Realms, the agrarian soul of empire. Artifacts are gathered. Plows. Scrolls on irrigation. Early tax ledgers. And in the center, Kazim, still rooted, but now framed by hanging silks painted with verses from agricultural poetry. The exhibition opens at twilight, with lanterns swaying like fireflies. Children run between displays. Elders weep at the sight of ancient grain jars. Musicians play flutes carved from cornstalks. Salim walks the hall slowly. He stops often. At a broken hoe, a chipped amphora, a faded sketch of a farmer's wife, and at Kazim. He kneels. In the empire, for a moment, kneels with him. Kazim's fame grows faster than its roots. Within weeks, songs are written. One, called Root Beneath My Rib, becomes popular even outside the palace, hummed by boatmen along the Bosphorus and whistled by seamstresses threading gold into wedding veils. Merchants in Adirna claim their vegetables grow better if music from the song is played softly in the fields. Whether it's science, miracle, or sheer romantic silliness is hotly debated. But Kazim is no longer just a vegetable. It's an emblem, a myth in slow motion. In the Grand Bazaar, a new fad emerges. Kazim-shaped candles, waxy and lopsided, sold with mini velvet cushions. One jeweler sets a ruby in the center of a carved turnip brooch. Demand outpaces rubies. The Sultan's guard must intervene when a noblewoman tries to bribe a blacksmith for a forged, blessed root replica. Back in the palace, Salim is both pleased and pensive. It is like raising a poet who only knows silence, he says to Yusuf one night, as they sip rose sherbet beneath the canopy of stars. Kazim asks for nothing. And yet he teaches everything. Yusuf nods, gently setting down his glass. He has, he confesses, begun dreaming in root systems. Salim smiles. You are becoming soil literate. That week, something unprecedented occurs. Kazim blooms. Just one flower. Tiny, white, and trembling on a slender stalk. It's so delicate the guards stop breathing when they first see it. The head gardener faints outright. A physician is called, not for Kazim, but the gardener. Salim arrives in silence, stepping barefoot again through the dew. He kneels before the flower. He speaks, he whispers. He offers potential. The implications spiral. A turnip that blooms? The scholars gather in frenzy. One insists this means Kazim is no ordinary turnip but a hybridized heirloom lost to time. Another claims divine intervention. A third claims fraud, and is promptly assigned latrine duty in the eastern courtyard for insolence. The poet Halil pens a short verse, one root, one bloom, a whisper of green amid the throne. Is empire not grown? Salim claps softly at the reading. He has it etched into a ceramic tile. But the vizier is less charmed. He arrives, face pale. The Janissaries, he says, have questions. Oh. Selim's eyes twinkle. They ask if Kazim is in the line of succession. There's a pause. Let him decide, Selim replies. That evening, a tiny velvet sash is draped around the flower stalk. A formal portrait is commissioned. Kazim, center stage, flanked by 2 falcons and a decorative decanter of molasses. The artist paints in silence, weeping openly. Meanwhile, a visiting astronomer named Taki al-Hikmah proposes a new calendar rooted in tuber life cycles. He presents a draft: sprout month, planning and prayer; blooming week, reflection and hope; harvest tide, thankfulness and pickling. Selim approves it in spirit. Word reaches the provinces. Town criers now end their announcements with "Long live Kazim." Children send drawings. Some depict Kazim with wings. Others imagine him with a beard. The painter is asked to add a faint halo, but amid all the admiration, a strange undercurrent emerges. Not everyone is pleased. In a small tea house in Bursa, a group of melon farmers begins to murmur. What makes a turnip so special? One asks, scowling into his tea. Melons take skill. They split if you overwater. A turnip? Any fool with a spade can grow one. They toast in solidarity. The melonists, they call themselves. Half joking. At first. Then come the pamphlets. Kazim is a fraud. Down with root privilege. Let fruit rise. Selim receives them with mild amusement. At last, he chuckles, a worthy opposition. But Yusuf frowns. They seek to divide. Selim nods. Then we must unite in salad. And so is born the great symposium of the garden. Representatives are summoned. Carrot growers, melon whisperers, radish loyalists, even a beet historian from Cairo. They gather under silken tents, seated on floor cushions embroidered with cucumbers and dill. There are debates, yes, some heated. One man throws a gourd. But in the end, they agree to collaborate. A new dish is created, the Concord stew, melon broth, pickled root, a dash of mint and narrative reconciliation. Kazim approves in silence, and as the sun sets behind the domes, a new era dawns, not just of turnips, but of shared soil. The great symposium of the garden becomes legend within days. Its minutes are transcribed onto silk scrolls and read aloud at village festivals. In the highlands of Anatolia, shepherds compete to memorize passages. In Baghdad, a scholar translates them into rhyming couplets, turning vegetable diplomacy into bedtime poetry for children. Selim is, for once, content to observe. He walks daily among the sprawling displays of gourds, tubers, and curious fruits, occasionally stopping to pose philosophical questions to no one in particular. If a melon dreams of roots, is it still fruit? Is a stew a treaty or a truce? Yusuf hums along behind him, now wearing a robe with turnip leaf cuffs. He no longer even questions the oddities. This is life now. Life is soil. The melonists, once rebellious, now style themselves as heritage gardeners. They issue statements. One begins, "We love Kazim. We merely seek fruit parity." Selim responds with a banquet. The menu is themed around unity: fig-stuffed turnip rolls, candied melon rinds, and radish pearls suspended in aspic. Guests are given commemorative spoons engraved with the motto, "All things from earth shall feast together." Midway through the feast, a thunderstorm rolls over the palace. Lightning streaks across the sky. The great garden drums with rain. And in the silence that follows, a soft, unmistakable popping sound. Kazim has produced a second bloom. This one is pinkish. Smaller, delicate as breath, the palace erupts. Cheers. Gasps. a spontaneous flute solo. The calligraphers collapse in poetic ecstasy. Selim, solemn, removes his turban and bows. He multiplies, he says. From that moment, the whispers begin. Will there be seeds? The implications are profound. Not just relics, not just symbols, but heirs. A lineage of turnips. Halil the poet writes, one bloom begot the next, soft-spoken root of roots. What soil gave thee vision? Kazim's second bloom is housed in a crystal bell jar. Each day it is misted with rose water and sung to by palace choristers. Visitors queue for hours to glimpse it. The Sultan's schedule shifts. Diplomats are required to view it before presenting credentials. But this bloom behaves differently. It opens slightly more each night, as if listening. The royal interpreter of botanical omens, yes, that is now a title, suggests it may be responsive to song that a music competition is held. The winner, a lullaby composed for oud and ney, titled Root Gently Down the Stream. Meanwhile, back in the Bureau of Root Weights and Measures, a crisis brews. The second bloom throws off the metrics. New categories are needed. They invent terms: aesthetic circumference, bloomal symmetry, root personality. Charts multiply. Clerks begin naming their inkwells after tubers. Selim, noticing, nods proudly. At last, bureaucracy with depth. But even as joy grows, so does strain. The Janissaries are restless again. Their training fields, still partially compost-laden, now host a series of sculpture gardens made from edible produce. Some of them find this undignified that a commander petitions for a return to steel and discipline. Selim grants it, partially. He commissions ceremonial spears tipped with polished turnip cores. He calls them thorns of peace. The guards are unimpressed. Tensions spike when a melon accidentally rolls into a sword drill. A minor injury occurs. The vizier seizes the moment. We need direction, he tells Selim, sternly. Vision, not metaphor. Selim considers this. That night, he dreams of Kazim speaking, not with words, but with light, roots reaching upward. A field pulsing like a heart that he wakes and declares, we will build a library. Not just any library. One entirely dedicated to plant lore, agrarian tales, and culinary memoirs. It is to be built beside the garden, shaped like a spiral, with floors patterned after seed rings. The foundation of the Rootwise archive begins immediately. Yusuf oversees construction. Halil begins compiling oral histories. Kazim's second bloom is assigned an alcove with skylight. Selim visits the site daily. Brick by brick, shelf by shelf, the empire turns a page. The Rootwise archive rises like a spiral fossil unearthed mid-breath. Each day sees a new layer added, stone upon stone, story upon story. Gardeners and scribes work side by side. Builders whistle lullabies when sung to seeds. Even the cats contribute, curling protectively around blueprints as if to bless the mortar. Selim III watches with the pride of a father, not of a building, but of an idea. It grows, he whispers each morning, as if the walls themselves respond to praise. Inside the half-built chambers, scrolls are already being sorted. There are tax ledgers noting grain moisture. Letters from farmers describing spiritual dreams involving wheat. Diagrams of forgotten irrigation techniques. One 14th century poem about a weeping fig tree now has its own reading alcove, scented with cedar and cardamom, but most sacred of all, the Kazim room. Octagonal, glazed with colored glass. In the center, a gently rotating pedestal holds a preserved sculpture of the first bloom. Not the original, of course, it wilted weeks ago, but a masterful wax replica created by the court's finest artisan, known only as the bee. Beside it, a guest book. Visitors write verses, reflections, even apologies. One entry reads, "Forgive me, I once laughed at roots." Another, "Kazim, you taught me patience." And one, in a firm imperial hand, he multiplies still. As the archive nears completion, something else begins to stir. Letters arrive from distant corners of the empire, tiny villages with strange tales. One describes a turnip growing in concentric rings, mirroring Kazim's blooms. Another reports a root that hummed faintly when held. Salim reads each letter carefully, spreading them across a silk mat in his chamber. "He has awakened his kin," he whispers. The vizier, ever wary, suggests these are exaggerations. "Hope spreads like wind, Your Majesty. Not all breezes bear truth," perhaps Salim says. But even a breeze moves leaves. The Rootwise archive opens with fanfare. A 3-day festival. Musicians play tunes inspired by tuber growth patterns. Dancers perform the sprout spiral. Children reenact the moment of Kazim's first bloom using paper hats and enthusiastic twirls. Foreign dignitaries arrive in confused amazement. The French ambassador mutters, "We brought artillery." They bring song and soup. He is later spotted enjoying a second bowl. A special exhibit is unveiled, Voices of the Seed. Each visitor is given a dried bean upon entry. At designated points, they may trade it for a story from a farmer, a chef, or a poet. Halil, now archivist-in-chief, glows with purpose. He has started dictating a new epic, the Root Chronicle. Volume 1 is titled, Kazim the Patient. Meanwhile, Salim grows quiet, not sad, not weary, just internal. He spends more time in the garden, more time with the cats. His robe grows simpler. His voice softer. One night, he speaks to Yusuf by a moonlit pond. "You know," he says, "I once feared irrelevance, that I would be a footnote. A reformer remembered more for paperwork than principle." Yusuf listens, "But now, I see. I have planted something that cannot be taxed or marched. Something that grows when no one is watching." A pause, even if it's just a story. Yusuf replies, "It's always stories." Salim smiles. Then the letters stop. No more village reports. No root songs from afar. A stillness settles, like the pause before snow, until one morning, a courier arrives on horseback, breathless and mud-smeared. From the east. From the furthest province. He bows low. Unrolls a parchment. Salim reads, then sits slowly on a stone. The message is brief. Something grows. Not turnip. Not known. But it sings. He hands it to Yusuf without a word. Then looks to the horizon. Somewhere, the soil has spoken again. The wind that follows the courier feels different, charged, expectant. It rolls in over the palace gardens, rattling the leaf screens and flipping pages of unattended scrolls in the Rootwise archive. Salim watches it from a shaded colonnade, a hint of smile behind his mustache. He clutches the message again. It sings, he whispers. Not a metaphor, not a poem. A fact, perhaps, or the start of one. The eastern provinces are rugged, rarely visited. Hills that fold into valleys like sleeping animals, where languages shift every village and songs are kept alive by breath alone. A place of whispered myths and wrong turns. Salim calls for an expedition. It takes 3 days to prepare. Maps are redrawn. A team is assembled. Yusuf, of course. Halil the poet, now carrying a satchel of dried root flakes and pencils. A botanist named Fiza, quiet and precise, who once mapped a yam's growth patterns using music notation. A chef, a guard captain, 2 scribes, and a nude player complete the entourage. Kazim is not brought. He remains, rooted in wax and memory. The journey is slow. They pass through fields rich with late-season barley, villages where turnips are offered like tributes, ends with murals of vegetables as saints. In one hamlet, an elder shows them a carved stone said to predate the empire, etched with the shape of a leaf. The first route, he says, and one elaborate 18 night, they camp beneath olive trees. Halil reads aloud from the route chronicle. Yusuf snores. The oud player composes fragments of melody, noting that the soil seems to harmonize with certain tones. By the 10th day, they reach the edge of the province. There, cradled between two hills, is the village of Caricus. It is quiet. Too quiet. Not ominous, just listening. Fiza kneels in the main square. The soil here, she says, feels aware. A boy leads them to the field. It's small. Uneventful at first glance. Scrubby weeds. Cracked stones. But in the center stands something curious, a stalk. Twisted. Luminous. Faintly pulsing. No leaves. No blooms. But a sound. Subtle. Continuous. A hum. Like distant bees, or breath caught in a bottle. Salim approaches. He kneels. Places a hand to the earth. Closes his eyes. He hears something, not words. Not melody. But emotion. A slow chord of being. The deep cello of patience. The flute of yearning. The heartbeat of green things waiting. He opens his eyes. This, he says, is not a route. It is a reply. The group camps near the stalk. Notes are taken. Sketches drawn. Poems start themselves and finish abruptly. That night, Fiza announces, "This is not of any species I know. It may be the result of cross-root pollination. Or. She looks away. Or it's not a plant." The days pass. The hum changes pitch slightly with the sun. Animals avoid it. Birds circle above. A local farmer says it once glowed blue during a storm. Salim stays silent most days, watching, listening. Then, on the 6th morning, the stalk bends, not in wind. There is none. It leans slightly toward Salim. Halil weeps. The stalk is dubbed Nezim, whisper, in old tongue. They begin writing its story, not analyzing, recording. Like archivists of an ancient, breathing book, Yusuf builds a tiny fence around it. Just symbolic. Salim does not try to name it beyond Nezim. It's enough, he says. We are not always meant to understand. They return to the palace 2 weeks later. Changed, the Rootwise archive receives a new wing. The living section. Nezim's tale becomes a pilgrimage. Not physical, but spiritual. Readers come, sit, read the notes, then leave quietly. Many plant seeds afterward. Without fanfare. Salim's final entry that season reads, "One root taught us patience. One song taught us to listen. I wonder what comes next." He signs it simply, S. Spring returns not with a trumpet's blare, but a whisper through barley fields, the shiver of fig leaves, and the faint sound of old men telling stories by fountains. In the palace, the turnip beds sprout early. Yusuf attributes it to the Nezim effect, a catchphrase that catches on quickly and is soon printed on handkerchiefs, olive oil tins, and even the labels of a newly popular bath so-called root rinse. Salim 3 walks the gardens with bare feet more often now. His pace is slow, not due to age, but attention. He stops to observe ants. He praises the curvature of a sprouting radish. He spends hours in the living section of the Rootwise archive, rereading his own travel notes and quietly editing Halil's early verses with a charcoal nub. On occasion, he smells the spines of old books. He claims knowledge has scent, and that knowledge grown near vegetables smells sweeter. Yusuf notices the change. "You're quieter than usual," he says one evening, pruning a stubborn vine. "I am listening more," Salim replies. Even when the soil says nothing, it still speaks. Not all is calm. The vizier grows increasingly frustrated. The empire, he argues, cannot run on parables and petals. Trade routes need attention. Rebellions simmer in the west. A copper mine has collapsed. There are rumors the Venetians are mocking the Sultan's turnip obsession in satirical plays. Selim listens politely. Then, perhaps we should invite them to the garden. And so, the great Venetian visit is arranged. The delegation arrives with stiff collars, shiny boots, and thinly veiled curiosity. Their ambassador is a man with a permanent squint and a voice like oversteeped tea. He carries a monogrammed walking stick and a secret stash of biscuits. The first banquet is modest, by palace standards. Turnip souffle, fig salad, and a melon chutney that brings a rare smile to the vizier's face. A string quartet plays a variation of Ode to a Root, and the wine is served in glasses shaped like acorns. On day 2, they are taken to the archive. The Venetian ambassador lingers in the Cosm room longer than expected. He does not speak. A translator later reports seeing him brush the edge of a display case with reverence, whispering, strangely, "Holy." On day 3, they are brought to the garden. There, under a pale canopy, Selim reads aloud a single passage from the Root Chronicle. "We are not born from conquest, but from patient soil. Let no empire forget its earth." The Venetians remain silent. But later that evening, a steward overhears one whisper, "We brought muskets." He offered meaning. A tentative friendship forms. Cultural exchanges are proposed. A Venetian sculptor is invited to carve the likeness of Cosm in Carrara marble. In return, Ottoman calligraphers begin transcribing Italian herbology texts in elegant swirls. Meanwhile, Cosm's story evolves. The second bloom, long thought dormant, suddenly sheds a single petal. It drifts for minutes, riding a breeze that smells faintly of clove and fresh bread. It lands on the palace's central sundial, where it remains untouched for hours. Halil sees it and writes, "A petal unrooted carries all we dare not speak." Still, it turns to light. The Rootwise archive holds a public reading. People weep openly. A dervish collapses mid-spin. A child asks if Cosm is the moon's cousin. Elsewhere, small stories ripple. In a fishing village, a boy plants lentils in a circle and claims to dream in color. In the highlands, an old widow mails a single sprouted yam to the palace with a note. "He bloomed for me. Thank you." In Istanbul, a baker begins shaping loaves into root-like spirals. She calls them kazimbret. They sell faster than she can bake. A street ballad emerges. Round and soft, it feeds the wise, baked with laughter, shaped by skies. Selim orders them served every morning, alongside pickled plums and a mint-infused egg custard. But amid this gentle blossoming, another message arrives. From Caracas, Nezim is gone, not dead, not wilted, gone. The fence remains. The field still hums faintly, but the stock has vanished. No sign of removal, no marks in the soil, just absence. The news is delivered at dawn. Selim reads the letter thrice, then sits in silence beside the oldest olive tree in the garden. It creaks slightly in the morning wind. Yusuf approaches hours later. "Shall we send a team?" Selim shakes his head. "No. Let the soil speak when it's ready." And so they wait. No proclamations. No search. Just quiet days in the garden, listening. In Nezim's place, Selim plants a single seed. No fanfare. No witnesses. Just his hands, the earth, and a soft chant. A week later, a sprout appears. He does not name it, but Halil does. In secret, in a new notebook he titles Hope's Shadow. The days grow quieter in the commons. By now, you know its rhythms. You walk the same stone path, but it feels changed, not by new features, but by new awareness. The fig tree, once ornamental, is now a fixture of your morning gaze. Its bark has deepened in color. Its leaves whisper differently. Salim has taken to humming. Not melodies, exactly, but patterns of breath. He does so while tending the garden, as though the roots understand better through exhalation. He says little these days, except when prompted. And even then, his answers often take the form of metaphors, comparisons to root systems or rain patterns, or the stubborn memory of soil. One morning, a small group of scribes arrives from the eastern gate. They wear soft robes and carry their scrolls in bundles bound by twine. Their sandals are dusty. One of them carries a clay jar of ink that smells faintly of mint. They do not introduce themselves. They nod to Halil, set up their writing tools beneath a shaded awning, and begin sketching. They draw slowly, reverently. First the fig tree, then the larger bulbs, then the strange cradle Yusuf is building by the garden's edge. They whisper as they work. Some believe the turnips are beginning to echo sound. A scribe leans in close to the largest bulb, closes his eyes, and says, "I heard a laugh." Another nods solemnly, dips her brush, and begins recording without words. Emin notices something odd. The turnips have begun leaning, not toward the sun, but subtly, consistently, toward the fig tree. She proposes a quiet experiment. She and two apprentices begin marking shadow positions at noon for 21 consecutive days. They log light angles, soil moisture, ambient temperature. They chart the angles. The result is irrefutable. The turnips lean to each other. They're remembering information, Fiza says. This is not orientation. It's congregation. Salim nods when told. It's what we forget to do, he says. But they remember. The fig tree seems taller this week. Not by much, but enough to make you notice. Its branches spread wider. When you pass beneath them, you feel a momentary hush, as if the tree were holding breath on your behalf. Children start visiting the garden more often. They come in pairs, sometimes in trios. They bring gifts, bits of ribbon, flattened coins, small bells, broken spoons. These they place gently near the base of the fig or among the turnips. One child, possibly the same one who named Pickle, leaves drawings. One day, a crown made of vines. Another day, a sleeping cat curled atop a mountain of turnips. Another, a figure labeled simply, "The Listener." Adults do not interfere. They watch from afar, their eyes soft. Yusuf continues his construction. He works in silence. He refuses nails or glue, preferring jute cord and branches bound by tension. He braids and unbraids until the frame finds its shape. After 10 days, it's unmistakable, a cradle. But too large for a child. Too small for a person. It's for what comes next, says Yusuf, though no one asked. Salim spends hours sitting beside it, whispering to the unfinished weave. The fig tree drops a single fruit. Only one. Salim finds it in the early morning dew. He splits it 4 ways, one slice each for Yusuf, Emin, Fiza, and himself. They eat in silence. It tastes of quiet, of pages not yet turned. That night, no one dreams. The next morning, the soil beneath the fig tree glows faintly, and in the cradle, something sprouts. The scent lingers. Days pass, and the aroma of the sprout, warm, faintly spiced, heavy with comfort, seems to cling to the very air. Some claim it makes them sleep more soundly. Others say their dreams have changed. Halil dreams of walking through orchards of clouds. Yusuf, typically dreamless, recalls a boyhood memory of planting lentils with his grandfather and finds himself crying quietly into his morning tea. Salim begins each day the same way now. He wakes before dawn, walks barefoot to the sprout, and sits beside it with a bowl of honeyed goat's milk. He never speaks to it aloud, but some believe they've seen his lips move. not in speech, but in listening. The palace adjusts. Court rituals begin to align with the sprout's rhythms. Officials start meetings only after the daily scenting. Couriers arrive bearing petitions that begin, "I await your wisdom," as patient as root. The vizier insists on maintaining boundaries. We are still an empire, not a grove. But even he begins carrying a small carved walnut tucked into his robe for comfort. In the markets of the capital, turnip-inspired perfumes begin appearing. One called Earth's First Whisper becomes so popular it is rationed. A rival scent, Sprout's Caress, causes a minor riot when a vendor claims his blend is more authentically fragrant. Theologians weigh in. One imam declares the scent a reminder of Eden's original soil. A monk writes a treatise titled Incense of the Inner Garden. Debates erupt in tea houses. Is the scent divine, or just a very peculiar plant? Fiza returns to analyze the scent. She brings equipment, notes, and a long, skeptical frown. After 3 days, she reports it is not chemically unique, but something, in how it disperses. It seems to adapt to the mood of the person smelling it. The palace silently agrees to stop measuring it. Instead, they start recording reactions. Each visitor writes a word in a book left beside the sprout. The book quickly fills. Words like peace, home, memory, bread, mother, oh, why am I crying? A second book is started. Then a third. Salim reads them every night. Halil begins composing a series of meditations called Scripts. Each entry includes a short poem, a personal memory, and a drawing of something he cannot name. Meanwhile, the sprout, now called only the scent, continues to bloom. Not dramatically, not visibly, but its presence deepens. Pickle the cat refuses to sit anywhere else. Songbirds begin nesting in nearby fig trees. Even the koi in the palace pond swim in patterns that mirror the sprout's curve. Salim begins inviting only those who do not ask to come. The scent chooses, he tells the vizier. Not all roots are ready for air. The vizier grumbles. But even he spends one evening nearby, alone, with a flask of plum brandy and a look of wordless nostalgia. Then comes the day of silence. The scent stops. No fanfare. No decay. Just stillness. Visitors notice first. They sniff the air. They try to provoke it. Music, incense, laughter, tears. Nothing. Panic spreads. Is it dying? Fiza returns again. She finds no rot, no illness. It's not dead, she insists. It's just done for now. Salim does not react. He spends the day in the archive, reading old myths about trees that only bloomed once every 100 years. He says nothing. That night, he dreams. In his dream, he stands in a vast field, blank and scentless. But beneath his feet, the soil pulses. Alive. Waiting. He wakes, writes a single line, and posts it at the archive's entrance. When the scent fades, the root deepens. And with that, the palace exhale their fears. The garden returns to its rhythm. The scent remains, not perfumed, but present. The visitors thin, but those who remain do so without expectation. They bring soil from their homes, adding handfuls to a growing mound beside the plant. Salim calls it the root commons. From this soil, new sprouts begin to appear. Each different, each small, but unmistakably stirred by something deeper, and the empire, quietly, begins to plant again. Autumn arrives with neither pomp nor glow. It settles into the palace like a cat on a warm tile, easing in, curling around the corners, unnoticed until it is everywhere. The fig trees yellow. The vines crisp at their edges. The scent of cumin and burning almond shells wafts from street vendors outside the gates. Salim rises before the light. The second stalk continues to grow, not rapidly, but with intention. It twists gently westward, toward the courtyard's oldest olive tree. Pickle sleeps beneath it almost daily now. She snores loudly. No one minds. The palace staff have adopted a new rhythm. Root Day has become a weekly ritual, its original simplicity deepening into something sacred. A musician brings a dulcimer and plays lullabies for the soil. A scholar from Cairo recites ancient agricultural hymns. A boy reads a letter aloud from his sister who cannot walk. I imagine your garden like a place where feet are not needed. One visitor, a woman with hennaed hands and a voice like cracked silk, kneels beside the second stalk and whispers a secret in a language no one else knows. The stalk leans. Just slightly. It is enough. Halil writes in rude voice. Today the air felt like memory pressing gently against my skin. Elsewhere in the palace, walls are repainted in earth tones. Turmeric, olive, charcoal, clay. Even the vizier's robes have grown browner, less gold. He no longer argues about budgets. Instead, he submits proposals on recycled parchment and signs them simply. One morning, a letter arrives from the coastal town of Tyre. Enclosed is a photograph, an ink print of a boy holding a root shaped like a spiral. The note says, he calls it a cosm coil. He thinks it grants dreams. Salim frames the picture. It hangs beside the archive's entrance, across from the Ruche shed Alice. That same week, the second stalk does something new. It begins to shed leaves. Not from illness. From rhythm. The leaves fall gently, each one patterned with tiny speckles, like hand paintings. Children collect them and string them into garlands. A new Root Day custom is born. Leaf lines, carried like prayer beads. Yusuf notices the soil has thickened, richer, darker. It holds better now, he says. Like it's remembering how to nourish. Salim replies, that's all we need, isn't it? A remembering earth. Fiza returns for one last visit before winter. She brings a folded map showing botanical patterns traced from satellite sketches. The garden's frequency matches root networks forming across distant fields, she says. They're not identical, but they're inspired. She does not say cosm, or the scent, or even root. She says, this is something bigger. Quiet but big. The court physician visits Salim. Concerned. You've lost weight, he says gently. You're pale. I'm blooming, Salim replies, chuckling. Just inwardly. He refuses medicines. Eats less. Walks more slowly. But never misses Root Day. Never misses the garden. Halil begins walking beside him now, arm-length. They do not speak much, but when they do, it's often about bread. Bread, Halil writes one night, is what roots dream of becoming. Late in the season, as the first frost threatens the low stones, Salim calls Yusuf to his side. There will be a winter, he says. But there will also be more than winter. He hands Yusuf a seed. Small. Not labeled. I want it planted in the root commons. But only when the snow melts on its own. Yusuf nods. He pockets the seed, closes his fist, and places his other hand over it. A week later, Salim no longer rises before dawn. He still sits in the garden, still watches the second stalk, still smiles when he smells old bread from the kitchens, but now he listens more than ever, not just to roots or birds or visitors, but to silence, and the silence, rich and loamy, listens back. Winter comes slow, not as a conqueror but as an old friend walking at your pace. The first snow is light, hesitant, like powdered sugar over baklava. It lands on stone and stalk alike, melting almost instantly, as though asking permission to stay. The garden falls into hush. The root commons, once bustling with visiting soils and spontaneous offerings, now rest beneath a thin, uneven blanket. The second stalk stands still, its leaves mostly shed, but its posture proud, as if guarding the earth's breath. Salim now keeps to his chambers more often, though the windows are always open, facing the garden. His blanket is heavy wool, his tea stronger. He still reads every root day entry, every scribbled word in the archive's many volumes. Halil delivers them wrapped in silk, and together they sit in quiet commentary, a hum here, a sigh there, a chuckle when someone writes, "Today I told my cabbage I was proud of it." Yusuf tends the garden in the cold. He does not sweep the snow. Let it lie, he says. Roots like stillness. His beard is flecked with frost these days, his knees stiff. But he smiles more. The vizier grows silent, too. He no longer speaks of trade routes or grain storage. Instead, he sits beside the archives, practicing calligraphy and charcoal. Once, he delivers Salim a scroll with just 2 words, "Still growing." Salim, thinner now, with deep laugh lines, responds with "ANOD.I in the town of Tyre." Children begin pressing roots into ink and stamping their shapes onto canvas. A traveling merchant brings one such cloth to the palace. It shows dozens of root silhouettes, no 2 alike, and one, in the center, shaped unmistakably like Kazim. Salim asks for it to be hung above the Rush shed atlas. On root day, fewer come. The weather is harsh, and the journey long. But those who do come speak slowly, like they're stirring a pot. Stories take time to unfold. A shepherd sings about silence. A seamstress tells of threading wisdom into a hymn. A fisherman places a single salted anchovy at the base of the second stalk, saying, "For salt knows root better than sea." One child presents a rock. "I don't know why," he says, "but I think it belongs." Salim agrees. That night, snow falls heavier. The windows frost at their edges. Salim writes by lamplight. The soil does not sleep in winter. It remembers. It makes room. Halil begins composing the frost-strewn verses. Each is only 1 sentence long. They read like echoes. One says, "Even stillness has veins." Another, "Cold does not cancel growth. It delays it to savor it." A third, "Some seeds bloom only after goodbyes." Salim grows quieter. He speaks mostly in questions now. To no one. Or to everyone. What shape is patience? Do roots dream in color? What if memory is a vegetable? Visitors, if they're lucky, find him seated by the window. He greets them with tea, nods toward the snow, and says only, it listens. Pickle, old as a proverb, sleeps curled beneath his chair. She no longer chases beetles. But when someone new enters, she flicks her tail once, as if acknowledging a truth they have yet to say. Then, one morning, the second stalk leans west, not much. Just a breath's angle, Salim notices. So does Yusuf. They say nothing. That evening, the frost breaks for an hour. Meltwater runs down the cobbles in lazy rivulets. A patch of soil beside the root commons darkens, just slightly. Halil takes the seed from Yusuf's drawer. Without ceremony, he walks into the garden, kneels, plants it. Then, he returns to Salim's chamber. He's planted it. Halil says softly. Salim closes his eyes, smiles, and the palace, the garden, the archive, the commons, they all hold their breath, waiting, listening, rooting. It is the stillness before change that takes the longest to describe. Not the moment of bloom, nor the shift of seasons, but the breath held just before. That is where we begin. The seed Halil planted lies beneath a crust of half-frozen soil, nestled in darkness, without witness. The second stalk remains unmoved, still leaning westward, its silhouette thin against the frost. The garden has become a painting. Still life. All frame, all pause. Even the wind respects it now, passing through without a rustle. Inside the palace, time slows to match the route. Salim no longer walks far. He rises later, reads slower, speaks rarely. He has taken to wearing only one ring, a plain iron band shaped like a root twist. When asked why, he says, because iron rusts, and that too is memory. Halil brings fewer words now, more silences. His newest verses are blank pages with only titles. One is called The Unplanted Goodbye. Another, What the Snow Forgot. Some visitors try to interpret the titles, arguing in the archive for hours. Halil listens, then smiles and says, "Perhaps it was never about the meaning." Yusuf, still faithful to the commons, has begun knitting small wool wraps for the new rootlings. The soil can't be lonely, he says, but it can be grateful. He speaks more with his hands now, less with his voice. He also carves tiny wooden markers for each patch of gifted soil, some with drawings, others with the initials of the sender, and a few with nothing at all. The vizier, once mighty in voice and posture, has softened fully into a gray shawl and a pipe that smells of honeyed oak. He's written a children's book about vegetables who solve mysteries through empathy. It is wildly popular in the coastal schools. He now visits the archive regularly, often carrying a satchel of candied chestnuts and a thermos of barley tea. Sometimes he offers no opinions at all, only presence. Root Day continues, but only in whispers. Visitors now leave warm cloth, handwritten riddles, and dried fruit. One elderly woman crochets a turnip with eyes. It is left on the bench, and somehow no one moves it. Over time, other crocheted companions appear, a beet with spectacles, a rutabaga wearing a scarf. The bench becomes known as the soft garden. Then, one morning, the ground breathes that it is not seen, not heard. But everyone feels it. A shift, not beneath them, but within them. Yusuf is the first to speak. It's waking. Fiza arrives days later, unprompted. She sets down her satchel and simply begins to hum. She tests no soil. Instead, she sits quietly, face turned toward the commons, as if waiting for a forgotten song to resume. The seed sprouts. Not upward, not at first, but outward. Fine filaments stretch, trace lines through the commons, weaving soil stories no eye can see. People begin reporting strange dreams, of languages that sound like rainfall, of roots forming constellations, of whispers in their mother's voice calling them home. Salim knows. Though he cannot rise, he whispers to Halil. He remembers what we forgot to teach. And the sprout rises. It is unlike Kazim, unlike the scent, unlike anything. Its stem is almost translucent, yet its leaves curl with assurance. It glows faintly, but only when no one looks directly. Some say it sings, but not through sound, through weight. A kind of gravity that draws thought inward. Children name it quietly. Kukukisik, little light. One writes it down. It is passed like a lullaby. One child hums it to a cat. Another draws it in dust with a stick. In a village far south, someone paints it on the side of a grain silo without explanation. Everyone seems to understand. Salim calls it the answer we never asked for. He spends his days now watching the window. Yusuf places a warm stone under his blanket each morning. Halil reads aloud not his poems, but old folk tales. Stories of hens who speak in riddles, of goats that navigate by moonshadow, of seeds who choose their gardener's point. One morning, Salim does not wake, but his breath still lingers in the folds of his robe. In the garden, Kukukisik bends slightly east. Pickle meows once, loud enough to echo off the walls, then curls up on Salim's chair, tail over her nose. That evening, every lamp in the archive flickers. Not out. Just once. If bowing. In the weeks that follow, the palace does not mourn traditionally. There are no trumpets, no black banners. Instead, The kitchen bakes extra loaves of kazim bread. Visitors are encouraged to plant something. The archive installs a new wing, the listening chamber. Its only contents are cushions, cups of warm milk, and a window overlooking the garden. And on the spot where Salim last sat, they plant a single fig tree. No plaque, no speeches, just a figure. In spring, it blossoms quietly. Winter lifts like a breath released, long held. The garden stretches beneath a cloudless sky, blades of green pushing through soft, thawed earth. The root commons glistens under dew, soil turning supple beneath Yusuf's boots. No one replaces Salim. That is never even discussed. Instead, the garden continues. The archive grows. The visitors come. And Kukukisik, the little light, becomes not a monument, not a relic, but a rhythm. Halil takes over the reading circle, held now beneath the fig tree. He does not read his own work. Instead, he selects from the hundreds of visitor journals, turning their soil words into performance. He sings. He whispers. He laughs aloud when a child's note says, "The sprout waved at me." Maybe. The vizier, now mostly known as Uncle V, runs a small booth on Root Day where children can decorate root vegetables with chalk and fabric. He hums as he works, often to a tune that has no name. Fiza resumes her route mapping, but only part-time. The rest of her hours are spent helping rebuild village gardens in places once forgotten. She teaches school children how to compost and how to say thank you to a bulb before pulling it. And Yusuf, slower now, tends the soil with reverence. He speaks often to the fig tree. Never expecting reply. One day, Halil notices something. He pulls Yusuf aside and gestures to the bark of the tree. Etched not by knife, but as if grown that way, are curling marks in the shape of root veins. They look like writing. Yusuf does not try to translate. He just says, it listens still. A festival arises without decree. It is not declared, not posted. One morning in late spring, people arrive with bread, seeds, and old stories. They sit. They eat. They share. Someone calls it Salim Day, and the name sticks, not because anyone made it so, but because it simply was. Children play in the root commons now. Carefully. Respectfully. One girl claims she felt the soil tell her a joke. When asked what it was, she grins and says, "I forgot." Halil writes that down. Kukukisik grows no taller, but it deepens. Its leaves are used in tea now, just one per pot, said to bring dreams of conversations that were never had, but should have been. The listening chamber expands. A second window is installed, facing sunrise. A third, much later, toward moonlight. Visitors write fewer words, but deeper ones. One card reads, "I didn't know how to forgive my brother." Then I saw a beetle push a leaf and thought, ah. Outside the palace, Change Blooms. In Aleppo, a mural of the root commons is painted across the walls of a library. In Thessaloniki, school children recite Kazim's origin as part of their history lessons. In Smyrna, a bakery sells a loaf shaped like Kukukisik's leaves. The baker says he doesn't bake it, it bakes him. And in the garden, the fig tree drops its first fruit. It lands in the soil. Rolls once. Stops. Yusuf, now bent with age but steady in hand, picks it up. He does not eat it. He sets it on the bench. That night, it is gone. In its place, a note. Thank you for waiting. Summer arrives not with trumpets, but with a low, lush murmur. The garden glows. Vines cling more eagerly. Herbs swell with fragrance. Kukukisik hums faintly in the heat, not musically, but as a presence, a kind of invisible heartbeat pressed into the space between breaths. The air is slow and rich, filled with the scent of sage, fig leaves, and warm earth. Every breath feels earned. Root Day becomes weekly now, not just in the palace, But everywhere, town squares fill with small baskets, each containing a vegetable and a memory. In Konya, someone writes a ballad to a potato that saved a marriage. In Bursa, a teacher composes multiplication tables using radishes and pride. In a dusty village near the coast, a woman places a beat in the town square every week with a single word pinned to it. This week it says forgive. The archive begins receiving letters from places beyond the empire. Morocco, the steppes. A monastery in Ireland sends a sprig of sea parsley with a note. For your soil, from ours. We too listen now. One letter arrives folded into the shape of a turnip. Inside, a drawing of a hand holding nothing. Halil installs a weather wall at the garden's edge. It's blank. Visitors chalk what they feel, not the weather's temperature, but its tone. Some days it says, forgiving or tart. Once, someone writes, regret and rosemary. A child draws a spiral and calls it Thursday. No one erases anything. The wall accumulates tone like bark gathers scars. Children nap in the listening chamber now. Not out of boredom, but ease. Parents smile. One child wakes and says, I met a tree in my sleep. It forgave me for something. Another murmurs, I heard dirt breathing. The chamber becomes not a room, but a lullaby. Yusuf begins compiling a new book, not of facts or records, but gestures. He titles it Gardener's Grammar. It contains illustrations, how to place a pebble gently, how to bow to soil without bending too far, how to stand still enough to be heard by a worm. A special section is added for root laughter. It's rare, he says, but the soil does chuckle. Kukukisic's leaves turn slightly violet in full sun. This becomes a symbol. Weavers across Anatolia begin threading one violet stripe into carpets. Not always in the same place. Just once, always. Bakers make small loaves in its shape. Children press the leaves between book pages and whisper to them before sleep that on Salim Day, a goat wanders into the garden. It's unclear where she came from. She munches nothing. She circles the fig tree, rests beside Kukukisic, then leaves. No one speaks for an hour after. Later, the vizier says, sometimes, even animals give sermons. Fiza begins a quiet campaign to plant microcommons in towns and hamlets. She writes a small pamphlet titled How to Listen to Seeds Without Losing Your Job. It spreads fast. One boy builds a commons in a canoe. A woman tends hers on the roof of a caravan. A widower converts his storage room into a soil altar. It needed remembering, he says. Root day in the palace changes subtly. Visitors begin to bring stories not of the past, but of what they hope to grow. I want my father to speak again. I want to laugh like my sister. I want a tomato that tastes like Sunday. Some offer riddles to the soil. One woman sings an apology in 3 languages. The ground warms slightly. Kukukisic, still glowing gently, never stops leaning. Its posture becomes a lesson. Teachers point to it and ask students, where do you lean today? At sunset, the second fig drops. This time, it lands near the listening chamber. Yusuf, hair silver as candle smoke, picks it up. He offers it to Halil. Halil breaks it open and finds, not seeds, but a tiny scroll, written in charcoal on papyrus. The writing is smudged, but clear enough that IT says, you are not the last root. No one knows who wrote it, but they believe it. Autumn returns, not as repetition, but as remembering. The leaves fall differently now, some as notes, others as reminders. The fig tree bears again, slower. Its fruit hangs heavier. Kukukisic leans imperceptibly each day, always east, always patient. I in the archive. Halil creates a new volume. Things that shouldn't have worked but did. Inside, poems written on dried kelp, stories exchanged between ants and scholars, a photo of a child's hands holding dirt, labeled only "Thank you." There's also a dried orange peel someone folded into the shape of a boat. Beneath it, it sailed across my tea. Yusuf finishes Gardner's grammar. It's bound in bark and smells faintly of lavender. Its final chapter is blank. He says it must stay that way, so future hands can teach it new gestures. Visitors now pause longer in the listening chamber. Some nap. Some cry. One woman brings her baby each week and simply rocks. When asked what she hears, she says, not words. More like old warmth. The vizier retires quietly. No ceremony. Just a folded cloak and a pot of mint on his desk. The next day, he's seen building a compost bin in the city park. Children call him Compost Baba. He does not correct them. Fiza visits once a week, leaves a cup of honey water near Kukukisik, and murmurs, "We heard." She now trains others not to analyze roots, but to sit with them. Root Day evolves again. Now people offer not just food or stories, but tasks. One sweeps, another mends. A child weeds while singing to herself. The commons becomes a place of quiet doing. A woodworker begins carving benches that feel like laps. A grandmother knits a moss-colored shawl she claims helps leaves trust you. A potter brings bowls. When asked what they're for, she shrugs, listening soup. Halil starts a side project, the Root Bazaar. Nothing is sold. It's a trade post of small things with big feelings, an acorn cap for a joke, a feather for a silent nod. A jar of scentless perfume in exchange for a story you can't quite remember. Kukukisik doesn't grow taller, but deeper. Its presence stretches further. On a foggy morning, a sailor in a distant port dreams of roots curling around the mast. He wakes, writes to the archive, and encloses a sprig of sea lavender. In Istanbul, someone sculpts a fountain in the shape of the root comments. The water flows upward, briefly, before curving back into the basin. Children dip their hands and whisper wishes into it. The fig tree begins to shed its bark and ribbons. One looks like Salim's handwriting, another like an old musical note. Visitors collect them gently. Halil stores them in an envelope labeled Times Margin. One day, a letter arrives from a distant land. No return address. No name. Just a scrap of cloth wrapped around a seed. The note says, "Not all roots grow down." That evening, at dusk, Kukukisik glows slightly brighter. A light not of fire or sun, but recognition. The air thickens, not with scent, but with hush. Halil notes the moment. It nodded. He adds a second line, and we understood, without knowing how. Winter's edge arrives gently, as though apologizing for its own cold. The mornings are mist-veiled, the afternoons golden with long shadows, and the nights crisp enough to make breath visible, like thoughts made real. The garden slows, not from exhaustion, but from reflection. Kukukisik, still glowing faintly at dusk, is now surrounded by silent companions, small rootlings that sprouted on their own. No ceremony, no names. They lean toward it without touching, like listeners around a fire. Halil begins a new ritual called the quiet telling. No stage, no seating, no introductions. People gather in the commons after sundown, and anyone may speak. One story, one breath, and then silence. No response, no applause, just the telling and the listening. A baker recounts how he once whispered to a lump of dough and it rose better. A woman describes her first hug after 30 years alone. A boy simply says, "I missed my father's shadow," and walks away. Fiza calls these evenings root music. In the archive, a new map is drawn, not of roads or trade, of root networks. dotted lines where ideas, not armies, have traveled. The first line connects the palace to a tiny village known only for pickled onions. The note reads, "Here, someone sang to a beat." Yusuf slows. His joints ache more now. He is given a stool with woven reeds and places it beside Kukukisik. He sits with a thermos of mint tea and hums tunelessly. The garden seems to hum back. The listening chamber adds a fourth window, this one below foot level, showing soil. Children lie on their stomachs and watch earthworms slowly pass like sacred scrolls. Point one evening. Snow falls without warning. Thick, soft, unhurried. Visitors pause mid-sentence. Halil stops writing. Even Pickle, older than anyone now remembers, stares upward. The snow covers the commons in less than an hour. The fig tree stands like an elder wrapped in lace. Kukukisik does not shiver, the child whispers. Now it sleeps to dream. The next morning, Halil finds a small mound of snow beside the listening chamber. It is shaped like a cradle. No footprints around it. He says nothing. Places a leaf in it. Walks away. The vizier, now rarely seen, sends a package wrapped in rice paper. Inside is a single clove of garlic, an old teacup filled with cracked millet, and a note for the things that needed no explanation. Fiza writes an article called "The Gravity of Kindness in Root Structures." It is published in a journal that previously specialized in drought-resistant legumes. The editors call it a necessary detour. Yusuf begins to teach again, slowly. He takes apprentices not for skill, but for quiet. You must know how to speak with silence, he says. Roots are fluent in it. One of his students, a girl named Emin, discovers that the soil beside Kukukisik is warm even in frost. She lays her hands there daily, eyes closed, and once wakes up humming a song no one taught her. The archives receive a clay tablet etched in an untranslatable script. Experts fail. Children claim it smells like figs and turnips. The tablet is placed on a velvet cushion beside the listening chamber. Visitors begin to leave 3 things at the garden's edge. Something soft, something from home, and something they've forgiven. The palace begins to fade from prominence. Not vanish, just soften. It appears on fewer maps. Tourists come less often. Scholars arrive by accident. Most leave changed. Halil composes the Book of Breathings, a collection of nonverbal moments described in poetic footnotes. One entry reads, "The pause before someone answers with their eyes." Another, "The sigh that means, I am no longer afraid to stay." Kukukisik does not bloom. But one day, it leans toward a patch of undisturbed snow, and the snow melts. Beneath it, a tiny sprout. Morning fog curls gently through the root commons, softening outlines and swallowing footfalls. It feels like the world is whispering to itself, low, calm, unhurried. The garden doesn't wake. It stirs. Kukukisik, the first sprout, now leans ever so slightly away from the new one, and the unnamed sprout answers with the subtlest lean of its own. The echo sprout between them glows faintly, not a light you see, but one you remember after you've looked away. Visitors begin bringing instruments that do not make sound. Flutes without holes, harps with no strings, drums carved from bread. They sit silently with them. Occasionally, someone pretends to play. The silence grows intricate. Emin starts a new gallery beneath the archive, a space called Root Echoes. There are no exhibits, only dim rooms with soil floors and low benches. Guests sit. Some cry. Some nap. Some place fingers in the dirt and smile as if spoken to. A traveler from the east brings a bag of seeds, each wrapped in paper bearing a single word. Kindness. Forget. Linger. He plants none, just leaves them on the garden wall. Children take them one by one. No one knows what they grow. Fiza introduces a term, companion planting of memory. She explains it softly. Some stories only bloom beside others. The listening chamber now has a seventh window. It is under the bench. One must lie down and look up from underneath. All it shows is the grain of the wood and one's own breath. Halil stops writing for a time. He walks with Emin, listens more. I forgot how full silence is, he says. She replies, that's where it rests. On Echo Day, someone begins stacking pebbles. Another lines up spoons. A third draws circles in ash. When asked why, they answer, to echo the unsaid. Pickle remains gone. In her absence, children begin hiding notes in hollow twigs. Messages like, I missed today, or my dream had onions. They tuck these into cracks in bark and holes in the stone path. One morning, Halil finds a note not written by any hand he recognizes. It reads, You made room. He shows it to no one. He places it beneath the smallest sprout. The fig tree drops no fruit this season. Instead, its bark thickens in one patch, creating a rough oval. Visitors trace their fingers over it. Someone murmurs, it's remembering forward. A librarian in the archive begins recording breath sounds. Just breaths. Long ones, short ones, the pause between. A musician sets them to rhythm, and the result is played on bread day, not as a concert, but as a room where the rhythm plays while people eat. The unnamed sprout begins to curl. Not in pain. In dance.it leans first toward Kukukisik, then back toward the echo, then holds the center. A new curve forms. Like a question with no fear, Emin sketches again. This one she titles, Chord, Paused. Root week gains another day, fold day. On this day, everything folds. Cloth, bread, stories. A man folds a letter he never sends. A woman folds her jacket and lays it beside the new sprout. Yusuf now speaks only in fragments. The rain says hush. The beat knows. Let the light spill. He laughs when no one expects it and weeps without sadness. I am becoming mulch, he says. Joyfully, a new figure arrives. No name. They wear robes sewn from patchwork cloth, each square bearing a stitched symbol. They say little, but walk barefoot like Halil. They tend the soil with long-handled brushes and small bells. Visitors call them the weaver. The weaver brings no tools, but carries a satchel of wind chimes. Each time they pass the fig tree, the smallest chime sounds. Always the same note. Halil asks them once, what is your role? The weaver replies, to lean without tipping. That evening, the three sprouts seem to glow in harmony. Not brightly, just aligned, and from the soil, a scent rises. Not one that can be described, but every visitor names it the same, return. The commons changes in ways no map could capture. There are no new paths, no added plants. And yet, it is not what it was. A warmth lingers longer in the soil. Leaves fall in spirals. Birds land and do not hurry. The air carries a timbre of listening, as if the wind waits to hear itself. The echo sprout, once a mere whisper in green, now rises with grace. Still small, but assured. Its lean no longer mimics, it balances. In the early light, its silhouette resembles a pause in mid-song. Visitors begin arriving with items of half-completion, a scarf left unfinished, a recipe with no measurements, a letter written only in punctuation. They do not explain. They simply leave them gently, beside the echo sprout or beneath the fig tree. One man arrives barefoot, with a jar of rainwater collected over 50 days. He pours a single drop at the base of each sprout and whispers, "This was my mother's rhythm." No one asks him to clarify. Halil, who has not spoken aloud in weeks, begins etching symbols into soft bark. These glyphs are illegible, yet somehow familiar. He leaves no translations. Emin quietly copies them into a growing book titled Sounds That Forgot Their Names. One symbol resembles two open palms. Another looks like breath made visible. Fiza builds a new chamber beneath the archive, the unspeaking room. Lined in moss, it absorbs sound. You walk in, and all noise disappears, even your own breath feels hushed. Children leave it giggling. Elders leave it weeping. A young couple enters, stays for an hour, and exits holding hands for the first time in years. Emin weaves a series of small root dolls, each with a single button for a face. She places them around the base of the echo sprout. One morning, a visitor swears the dolls had changed positions. A child nods solemnly. They follow the hum. Yusuf now spends his days wrapped in a shawl woven from nettles and old root fibers. He sleeps near the fig tree. Some say he is dreaming the garden forward. Others say he's becoming soil. Once, he mumbles, where there are three, one becomes seed again. The weaver adds new gestures to the path, a tilt of the head, a step backward that means yes. They teach no one, but people begin to learn. One visitor mimics their walk for a full day and claims he dreamed without fear that night for the first time in 40 years. Root Week births a second Shardei called Soft Shard. It celebrates fragile resilience. A woman brings her cracked glasses and places them in sunlight. A boy breaks a toy deliberately, then hugs its pieces. A scholar burns a page of his thesis and stirs the ashes into clay. Artists arrive and begin to sculpt with whatever is broken. The listening chamber quietly expands. A new bench is added, shaped like an ear. If you sit quietly long enough, the wind carries faint murmurs. Not from outside, but from beneath. One day, the fig tree begins shedding bark not in strips, but in shapes. A spiral. A loop. A symbol like a resting hand. The bark pieces are gathered in silence. None are taken home. They are arranged in circles around the sprouts. At dusk, a gathering takes place, spontaneous, unannounced. Dozens arrive, sit, and say nothing. They watch the last light settle on the three stems. No one moves for hours. Then, one night, the fig tree hums. No voice, no tone, just the deep rhythm of being witnessed. It hums until dawn. In the morning, its bark has formed a spiral, and then, as twilight deepens, from the echo sprout a sound, not loud, not musical, but real. A soft tone between hum and breeze. It rises, then falls. One note. No echo. Just arrival. Halil drops his pen. Emin closes her eyes. Fiza whispers, "It began." No one speaks for a long time. They sit in the stillness. Even the soil seems to hold breath, and when they finally move, they do so as if through sacred AI. In the following days, things shift again. The wind no longer rushes, it listens. Roots deepen without moving. People who visit once, return weeks later changed. Someone builds a stone arch at the garden's edge. Above it, carved in 3 words, lean, listen, echo. The morning after the echo sprout sang, the garden did not awaken in haste. It breathed. It sighed. It lingered beneath frost-kissed petals, beneath moss-laced roots, and beneath the skin of those who had made the journey. The 3 sprouts no longer leaned, they reached. Not away from one another, not toward the sun, but inward, forming a triangle whose center pulsed with stillness. Visitors no longer came to witness, but to remember. Not their own memories, necessarily, but the act of memory itself. One woman brought a pillow and slept by the base of the fig tree. A boy returned with a bundle of old socks and tied them in knots, whispering names to each. A retired baker brought stale loaves and buried them lovingly beside the echo sprout. These were never wasted, he said, only delayed. Halil begins wearing a cloak sewn from discarded journal pages. Each one bears a phrase never finished. As he walks, some pages tear, fall, become part of the soil. The roots will finish them, he explains. Fiza curates an exhibit in the archive called Echoes Without Source. It includes footsteps recorded from empty rooms, shadows cast by missing furniture, and laughter heard only once from an unmarked well. The exhibit has no entrance. You must find your way in. Emi no longer draws with charcoal. She presses leaves against cloth and lets the pigment speak. One print reveals a spiral not seen since the day the fig tree humped. She titles it Origin, repeated. Yusuf does not die. He dissolves. One morning, his shawl is found draped over a root. Beneath it, a bowl of water, still warm. In the bowl floats a single fig leaf. No wind stirs it. Later, someone finds a single note etched in the bark behind where he used to sit. It reads, "Even stillness grows." The weaver begins weaving with silence. Not metaphorically, but truly long strands of hush stitched into empty air, hung from branches, forming canopies of pause. People walk beneath them and feel rested. Though they haven't slept, root week becomes root cycle. It repeats irregularly, like a heartbeat. No one schedules it. It arrives when it must. On one such cycle, the garden fills with dancers, none professional, all sincere. They move slowly, barefoot, tracing the root lines with their bodies. Someone plays a flute that doesn't sound. Someone else claps without hands. Still, everyone understands dot on soft shard. A child invents a game called Forgive and Forget. Players must name a regret, then bury it in a box filled with feathers. Everyone who plays leaves quieter. That night, the box hums slightly, just once. The fig tree, now central but unassertive, develops a hollow near its base. People begin placing their ears against it. Some report hearing music. Others say they hear their own name, spoken as it sounded in childhood. A scholar claims to have heard an unfinished lullaby. When she hadn't known she'd forgotten. The listening chamber's final window is installed. It faces downward, into a well. Drop a pebble, wait. What returns is not sound, but sensation, like standing near an old friend who no longer needs to speak. Someone describes it as a hug without arms. Halil writes his final entry, root script. It is not a book, but a series of gestures. A shrug, a nod, a kneel, a slow exhale while holding someone's hand. He records nothing more. Visitors perform the gestures in sequence, forming a quiet ritual they begin to call the root dance. Emin paints a mural across the archive ceiling. It is made of handprints, each layered until no individual mark remains. Visitors lie on the floor beneath it. One man claims he finally understood his mother's parting words while staring up. A girl traces the colors and says, "They remembered me before I arrived." Fiza publishes her last paper, titled Photosynthesis of Grief. It ends with one sentence, "What breaks becomes light." Her colleagues do not understand it, but they all agree it felt true. Then, one morning, the three sprouts begin to braid. Slowly, subtly, their stems wind together. No one interferes. They grow, not higher, but deeper into one another, as if becoming plural. At night, the braid glows faintly, not from within, but reflected in the dreams of those who sleep nearby. The garden grows quieter still. A hush so complete that even the insects seem to tiptoe. A visitor sets out bowls of clear water. Another stacks feathers on each windowsill. Two children write wishes on pebbles and roll them toward the braided stem. One pebble stops, shivers slightly, and sinks into the soil. A week passes. The braiding completes. The sprouts have become one. The bark changes. Not darker, but denser, like layers of stories finally told. Their base thickens, not in size, but in presence. Stand nearby, and your breath slows. Stand longer, and you begin to hear your own heart, but softer. Then the new tree dreams. This is not metaphor. One evening, without warning, it releases a warm breeze filled with tiny motes of scent, smoke, honey, cut grass, and old paper. Visitors fall still. Many begin to remember things they never lived: a grandmother's hands, a lullaby in a forgotten tongue, the comfort of being gently scolded. And then, without fanfare, without audience, the new tree blooms. Its petals are not petals. They are thin slivers of memory, the scent of first snowfall, the sound of turning a well-loved page, the feeling of being held without question. No two blooms are alike. A gust of wind passes. The petals do not fall. They hover, midair, like lanterns in thought. A child giggles and calls them rememberings. That evening, a final gathering forms. No announcements. People arrive and simply sit. No circle, no rows. Just proximity. Some hold hands. Some close their eyes. Some begin humming a tune not yet written. A child begins humming, then silence, then breath, then stillness, then night. And now, everything softens. The night stretches like a long sigh. The air is gentle. Even the stars seem quieter tonight, blinking more slowly, as if reading you to sleep. The garden, though still, remains alive beneath the hush. Roots shift beneath soil, slow and certain. The tree, braided from echo and lean, hums once more, but this time only inside you. You lie back, maybe on a bench shaped like a question, maybe against a stone worn by countless pauses, maybe nowhere you've ever been, and everywhere you needed. And though no one speaks, the silence around you feels full, not with words, but with presence. As if the world is cupping your breath in its palms. The fig tree does not shimmer. It does not glow. But you know it's watching. And you, for the first time in a long time, feel seen, not for what you do, or say, or strive to be, but for what you are when all of that falls away. A sprout, a root, a rhythm. You feel warmth near your feet. Perhaps a cat. Perhaps memory. Perhaps the echo of something that never needed to be named. The wind slows. Your thoughts slow with it. Let them go. You have earned this stillness. You have leaned. You have listened. You have echoed. Sleep well.